So that's a little bit about what the Red Shield is all about. And I encourage you too to get on board with it, because it does change lives. The money raised changes lives in our town. And it could be your neighbour, it could be a friend of yours, it could be someone in need that you come across at the shop. So I encourage you to do that. If you're joining us online, a special welcome to you. We're so glad that you're with us. We know that there's a few people online that are not in the room, and some of them are feeling a bit cautious because COVID, and where they live, it might be a little bit thicker than where some of us live. And so we just welcome you here. And if you do have COVID or had COVID, then we are praying for you. Okay, so God bless you, but I'm sure God's going to speak to you as well. Who was here 2 weeks ago? Hands up if you were here 2 weeks ago when we talked about the prodigal son. Yes, some people, yeah, some of you were here, that's good. If you weren't here, shame on you. No, I'm kidding. But most of you know that at Luke 15 is this story of the prodigal son. We know this. We've studied it. We've looked at it, and we looked at it 2 weeks ago. But Jesus actually tells three stories in Luke 15. He tells a story, firstly, about how a shepherd loses a sheep. He counts the sheep, 1, 2, 3, 4, gets to 99, realizes one is missing. And so he goes in search for that one sheep. And when he finds that one sheep, he picks the sheep up, puts it on his shoulders, carries it back to the group. And then there's 100 again. And he chucks a party to celebrate the fact that God has brought, that he has found his lost sheep. And then there's another story. The second story is this story of how a woman loses a coin in her house. And so she goes searching. She turns the house upside down to try and find this missing coin. And when she finds the missing coin, she realizes, yes, this is great, this is good news. And she chucks a party and invites everyone because she found what was lost. And it's supposed to indicate to us that God cares about lost things. That God actually has a heart for people who are lost. And then we started looking at the prodigal son story, and we looked at only half the prodigal son story. Right? It was the part where the rebellious son, he kind of goes to his father and he says, I wish you were dead. Give me my inheritance now. And so this is what happens. And then the son goes off in wild living. He's partying, he's going nuts, he's doing all this is going on, and he runs out of money. And as he runs out of money, he realizes he needs to eat, and he's hungry, and he's probably skin and bones at this point. And a guy gives him a job in a pig pen. And so he's in the pig pen with the pigs, probably covered in pig poo, not smelling that great. Probably skin and bones, and he was longing to eat the pods that the pigs were eating. So he was that hungry that he wanted to eat pig food. I don't think any of us have been at that level of wanting to eat pig sort of food, have we? No, we haven't been at that level. But this is where he's at. This is where he's at, and so he actually realizes, he comes to his senses. Remember, he came to his senses. Okay, that was like 3 people. I'm glad I came today and worked on this sermon for you guys. Say he came to his senses. The realization, the revelation hit, and he goes, my father's servants get treated better than this. I'm going to go home. And so he starts to go home. He's practicing this speech. Dad, I'm sorry. I've sinned against you. I've sinned against heaven. Can I be a servant in your? So he's practicing what he's going to say. And I can imagine as he gets over the hill, the father sees him. So the father's on the lookout and sees the prodigal son coming over the hill, and so he runs. Men didn't run in this day, but he ran. Wraps his arms around his son, which is kind of a good image, because he would have still been smelling like the pigs. And he probably his clothing would have been stained from pig poo and pig stuff. So he didn't look right. And he didn't sound right, and he didn't smell right, but the father still loves him anyway. And wraps his arms around him and says, bring a robe, bring a ring, bring some sandals, let's restore him back to the house. And then they kill the fattened calf. And we talked about where is Jesus in this story, and we saw that Jesus wasn't at any of the points, but he was the fattened calf in the story, that something had to die in order for him to be restored. And if that was the end of the service, if that was the end of the story, it would preach really well. And it did preach really well. If you weren't here, you can get it on podcast, YouTube. It's everywhere on platforms. But it preaches really well. But there's this second part to the story. Another character. Another person we need to look at that we haven't looked at yet at all. And that is the older brother. And he's also a prodigal as well. He's also a prodigal as well. So if you've got your Bibles, I want you to open them up to Luke chapter 15. We're going to look at verse 25 through in a message I've entitled, The Other Older Prodigal Son. I wanted to say the other one, but I didn't know how that would translate online when people were looking for it. So the other older prodigal son. Luke 15, verse 25 is where we're going to start. But before I do, I want to tell you a story. Just to give Tegan time to find it in her Bible. It's going to be forever like that now. You know that, don't you, Tegan? I'm so sorry. I want to tell you a story. For most of you don't know that I actually have a stepsister. Well, technically she's no longer my stepsister because our parents are no longer married. But she's still my stepsister. And she doesn't live too far away from here. But at the age of 13, she joined our family. She was 13, I was 12 at the time. So we were growing up a bit. And she joined our family. And to kind of just be part of the family, she wanted to do something nice. And she decided to cook us a 2-course meal. So anybody who cooks for me, I love them straight away, you know, so you can tell that I like my food. But she's decided to cook for the family. This is how she was to get into the family and be part of that. And it was great. It was a beautiful gesture. So we ate the first course, the main course. It was a roast, I think. Pretty simple kind of dish. And then she had this cake for dessert. A cake she had made from scratch. This cake looked amazing. It was a great cake. It looked amazing on the plate. She'd gone all out for the dessert, right? It looked great. Like, picture the best looking cake you can think of, and that's what it was. Like, this is on the plate. And she wanted us all to kind of start to taste this thing at the same time, right? And so there's 4 or 5 of us sitting at the table, 5 of us. And we've got our spoons. We dip into this cake that looked totally amazing. Big spoonfuls each we've got, and we put it in the mouth at the same time. Well, what happened next was that cake went flying out of people's mouths all over the table. Like, I kid you not, just poof, we spat it all out. And there was one reason we spat it out. She accidentally put salt instead of sugar into the cake. It was bad. It was bad. But I tell you that story for one reason, is because something could look good on the outside, but actually on the inside, not be quite right. She made one mistake and it ruined it. It looked good, but it wasn't quite right. And we're going to look at the older prodigal son, the other prodigal son, and we're going to see he made some mistakes. That on the outside he might have looked right, but on the inside, not quite there. Make sense? Longest introduction ever. Here we go, Luke 15, verse 25. It's coming up on the screens. Otherwise, follow along in your Bibles. Meanwhile, someone say meanwhile. The older son was in the field. So the older son was doing what he's supposed to do. He was still there. He was still with the father. He was working hard. He was doing the jobs that he was supposed to do and looking after the place. And even after the younger son had left and taken his half of the inheritance and went and possibly left him in financial ruin, he is still around and still working and still plodding on. He's doing the right thing. After a full day's work, so he's been out in the field, after a full day's work, he comes near the house and he hears music and dancing. Now, if you're one of the rebellious sons, or you got a bit of a rebellious streak in there, you'd be like, hey, what? The party started without me? I'm in. And you would just bounce in, being the life of the party, going and partying on like it was 1999. That's what the rebellious people do. There's a party going on, I'm in. I'm getting there. But actually, the older religious son doesn't do that. The older brother doesn't do that. Verse 26. So he calls one of his servants and asked him what's going on. This verse right here is powerful. This verse is just... God showed me something in this verse that is just unbelievably powerful. he called one of the servants and asked him what is going on. But to see what I saw and what God showed me, you have to lean into the scripture a little bit. You have to kind of put yourself in the story. Because remember, he's talking to two groups of people. If you look at Luke 15, right at the start, verses 1 and 2, you see that there's two groups of people, remember? There's the sinners and tax collectors, right? They're the ones that, you know, are represented by the prodigal son, the rebellious one. And that's in the story, this is representing that group of people, the tax collectors and the sinners, my people right there. Then there's this other group of people, the Pharisees and the tax collectors, right? They're the religious ones that look good on the outside, but maybe something different, something wrong on the inside. And so he's using these two brothers to contrast the two groups of people, right? And the original listeners to this would have heard, yep, we identify the rebellious, who are the religious? And so they're trying to figure out, the original listeners would have tried to figure that out. But the religious, the Pharisees and the teachers of the law, they were the ones doing the right thing. They were the ones that proclaimed that they were doing God's work. And they were the ones that looked after the crops and the fields, and they were the ones that worked hard doing, you know, serving God in the tabernacle and temples and stuff. They were the ones working and worshipping and proclaimed they had a good relationship with God. These are the ones that proclaimed to spend time with the Father. These are the religious people, the ones that proclaim to be close to God. But this is what God showed me. Instead of going to the Father, he went to a servant, right? Instead of going to the Father, he went to the servant. And then God kind of just laid it on me and he said, how often do we go to the world and pick that up and hold that as an image instead of going to God himself and getting that from him? And I have to admit, it kind of hit me because I've never seen myself as the Pharisees or the teachers of the law, the one that is, you know, in that category. But how many times do we do it? I mean, the world might say that you're ugly, but God says that you're a masterpiece. And the world might say that you've worked hard for your money and you've worked all your life and the possessions and the money you have is yours. Keep it. But God says, give with a cheerful heart. The world might say you don't need to go to church, but God says don't give up meeting together with the believers. The world might say that you're a dropout and a waste of time, but God says that you're his treasured possession and he wants to know you. The world might say that you're not important to anyone. God says, I sent my son just for you. The world might say that you were stuffed up and you were too far gone, but God says my grace is more than enough. The world might say that God is not real and that he's fake and it's just a fairy tale, but God says I am real and I'm always there for you. You see, the world can give us one image, can tell us something. And what he did was he listened to what someone else said instead of going directly to the Father. How many times do we do that? We listen to what someone else says instead of going to the Father. Now, I'm not saying, and let me clarify this and put this right, I'm not saying that you shouldn't seek someone out if you need some wisdom and advice. What I am saying is you need to take that wisdom and advice, take it back to the Bible, and make sure it lines up. You understand? See, he didn't do this. He just went to the servant. Powerful, isn't it? That we could take an image from somewhere else. And we do that. As Christ followers, we go, take that image on. Instead of actually going to the Father and seeing what he says about us. So he goes to the servant, hey, servant, what's going on over there? Verse 27, the servant replies, your brother has come home and your father has killed the fattened calf because he has come back safe and sound. Just pause quickly for a second here. Each family in this day and age had a fattened calf. They would have a fattened calf that they would try to fatten up. And on a very, 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 very special occasion, they may kill the fattened calf. Right? But it was seen as huge amounts of money invested into an animal. And so the son, the older prodigal son, sees that and hears that his dad has killed the fattened calf. And he becomes angry. he refuses to go in. He refuses to go in. Part of me kind of agrees with the older brother. I got to be honest with you, right? I got to be honest. Part of me actually agrees with him. You know, this rebellious brother almost sent us bankrupt. This rebellious brother just kind of spat in our faces and took off, and the father was in a lot of pain because his son just left. He wasted a fortune on living, wild living. I'm kind of with the older brother a little bit. You know, because he's angry. What's going on? Why is he getting something? Why make all a fuss over him? Let's see if he really is truly sorry before we go kill the fattened calf. Let's make sure he's a genuine transformation thing happening here before we do anything for him. He doesn't deserve that because he didn't treat us the same way. Like part of me goes down this line of thinking. And if you're honest, so do you. Because all I have to do is say pull someone up, and then pull someone else up who was a drug addict and an alcoholic, maybe someone who's prostituted themselves and out there, and you would automatically think, by nature, that you were better than them. Come on. Wouldn't you? I know, tough. The first part of this story preaches really well. The second part doesn't. This is hard, right? We have these biases. We have this thinking that we are better than. And then we see other people, we go, well, we're not at that level, so we put ourselves in the lower position, or we put ourselves in the higher position. And so part of me understands the anger of this young man, the older son. And let me say too, it's okay to be angry. Anger is a normal emotion. Anger is perfectly normal. What you do with that anger, on the other hand, can become positive or negative. Like if someone was beating a child up outside the front of our door, I've got to get angry. What I do next, though, is going to be positive or negative. Does that make sense? Anger is an emotion. Jesus got angry and flipped tables. Built a whip and beat the snot out of people. Like, that's what Jesus did when he got angry. God got angry once. He wiped out the world with a flood. Like anger is a normal emotion. It's what we do with that. And this is the mistake this brother made. He let his anger blind him to everything else. And he says, I'm angry. I'm chucking a pity party. I'm staying out here and I'm not going in. That's what he said. Verse 28, so the father went out and pleaded with him. I love the fact that there's nothing there that we don't know what the father said. We know what the son's going to say, but we don't know what the father says. It just says he pleaded with him. And it might be that he did that, and it might be done deliberately by the writer, because when we're angry, we sometimes don't hear what other people say. Yeah? I have an anger streak in me. I know this to be true. Right? It's kind of like actually a few years ago, I just remembered this. A few years ago, we went out to a restaurant in Kalgoorlie for Zoe's birthday. And it was the Thai restaurant up the top of the road. And one of our kids, I can't remember which one of our kids, he chucked a hissy fit. He went nuts. He got angry because he didn't want to eat there. He ended up spending the whole time in the car and not eating the meal and missing out because he couldn't understand, he wasn't listening because his anger was just too much. Maybe that's why the Bible leaves out what the father said. Maybe. That's a thought. I'll check it out there. You can study and get back to me if you like. But then, after the father goes out and meets with the son, the father pleads with him. The son says this in return. Look, all these years, I've been slaving for you, and I've never disobeyed your orders. Yet you never gave me even a young goat so that I could celebrate with my friends. This right here, sense of entitlement now. He's gone beyond kind of looking at, he's down here and I'm up here and I'm better. He's got to, I'm entitled now. He doesn't even address his father as father. He just says, look. Can you imagine the tone? Look here. in his anger coming out. Look here, all these years. Like, this is his argument. I told you, this doesn't preach as well as the first part of this story. He's worked hard. I'm entitled to this. I've done what you said. I should get this. I've never left you alone. That's a reason to give me what I want. You know, I deserve it. And I've heard people in the church say that I've been to church all my life and I've read the Bible and I've helped the poor and I've given money to this and I've got a chart at home that I tick list every day that I read the Bible so I can prove it to you that I've done all this. But yeah, why isn't God doing this for me? Why has he allowed this to happen to me? Because I've done all the right things. Works-based. He's saying, I'm better than the younger brother. Compare the two together. Have a look at what's happening. I'm better than him. This is what the older brother is saying. He's down here and I'm up here, and he's got this argument to let him know. I think one of the greatest lies that the devil actually tells us is that we can work our way to God. Or, if you do all the right things and tick the boxes, then God has to do it for you. Part of me wonders if that's us elevating ourselves to the same level as God. Does that make sense? Well, I've done all this, so you should do this. If God really loves you, then he will do X, Y, Z because you've done X, Y, Z. And this is one of the greatest lies the devil puts in there. We've all sinned. We've all fallen short of the glory of God. We've all stuffed up. God doesn't see a murderer and all that and see it as a worse sin than my sin, which might be lying, or I don't know, you know. Little white lie over a murderer, we kind of see that as degrees and we put different jail sentences around it, but for God, it's all sin. Same level. And so he's saying, no, I deserve this. Entitlement, I'm better than he is. And so he's got all this coming through. Trying to justify where he's at. And then verse 30. But when this son of yours, he doesn't even call him his brother anymore. This son of yours, who squandered all your property with prostitutes, came home, you killed the fattened calf for him. Quick question. How did the older brother know that he spent the money on prostitutes? It doesn't mention it further up in the story. Was he following the younger brother? Or was he telling a lie to make himself look better than his younger brother? See, now he's even crossed into lying to try and elevate himself up and push his younger brother down. He's saying, I'm better. Look, just see. I want this. I deserve this. God, do something. He's saying all of this stuff. And it kind of makes sense where his head's at. I'm going to get the keys to start coming up. Start playing for us when you can. Because the story finishes with the father saying to the son in verse 31, my son, you were always with me. And everything I have is yours. Verse 32, but we had to celebrate and be glad because this brother of yours was dead and he's now alive again. He was lost and now he is found. And that's where the story ends. We don't know if the older other prodigal brother went in to the party or not. We don't know if he went in or stayed outside being angry. We don't know. He looks good on the outside because he's done all the right things. But his heart probably wasn't quite right. Like a good-looking cake with salt instead of sugar. His biggest mistake in all of it, though, was the fact that he didn't claim what the Father had already given him. Verse 12 says this. Can I have verse 12 up? The younger one said to his father, Father, give me my share of the estate. So he divided his property up between them. He had already been given the inheritance. At any time, he could have gone and killed the fattened calf. At any time, he could have gone and got the goat. At any time, he could have done all of that. And his biggest mistake was that he didn't access what was already his. Make sense? He should have just gone, this is already mine. And the Father backs it up. You will always with me, and everything I have is yours. And that is literal as well as metaphorical. Everything was his. The Son had already taken his part of the inheritance. It was all his to have. But he doesn't accept it. And so I want to leave you today finishing this story, because this part of the story does not preach well. Luke, the first part of it preaches so good. It's great. It's exciting. The rebellious son coming home. Yay, we party. But then there's this one that is directed at the Pharisees and the tax collectors. Let me modernize this for you. Directed to the church. This is for us in the building who believe. This is for us who proclaim to be close to the Father, who proclaim to be close to God, who proclaim to walk with Him. We could be the second prodigal son or daughter. And do we come to God? Do we go straight to Him? Do we start to look at what someone else has got? Do we not step into the things that God has for us already? These are the challenges, and the answers to it are not given, because you have to make that choice. You have to do it. So as the singers come up and we kind of sit here and we're going to sing this song called Heart of Worship. Today is a chance to have a check, to do a check, a spiritual check. Like if you were going to the mirror and having a look at the grey hairs in your head, you're doing a check, see how much has come through before you have to dye it again. Do a check on your soul, do a check on your spirit. Is there areas of your life that you are acting more like the Pharisees and the teachers of the law, looking good on the outside, going through the motions, but not actually got the heart right? And so we're going to sing this song, and maybe if God is speaking to you through this, then all you need to do is maybe just stand and simply pray, God, take my heart of entitlement, take my heart of coldness, take my heart of jealousy, take my heart of whatever out, and let me have a heart of worship for you. So we're going to sing this song, and this is a time for you to do that check. So if God is speaking, you can stand where you're at, and then we'll pray afterwards.
When the music fades, all is stripped away.